Hey there hunters, and welcome back to the Gunners Guild. Today I'm going to be doing a breakdown of my heavy bowgun TA run versus Malzeno from pre-title update 1, and I'm going to go step by step explaining my thoughts, what I'm doing, and what I'm preparing for during this fight. Hopefully it will give you some insight as to why I do the things I do, and how to better yourself for this hunt. Now specifically, this was also before the tracking nerfs, so I assume I could do a more aggressive script these days, but just remember this was pre-nerf. And so we're going to let the run play out as I talk about some of the core concepts and highlights to this fight, and then we'll go back for the play-by-play. So let's start with Malzeno himself. His hit zones are actually pretty forgiving for us gunners, giving us a nice 45 on the head on his normal state and a 45 on his front arms in his blood-eating state, or we're just going to call it morb mode. He's really only weak to dragon element, and sadly we can't carry enough ammo to build solely around dragon. But now with armor augments, we should be able to do some sort of like spread and dragon hybrid setup to be able to push bigger numbers during his topples. But since this was pre-title update 1, I just had to stick with raw ammunition, so sadly, I just went with spreads. Pierce also wasn't going to do much on this guy since all his other hit zones are really bad even for raw ammo. And Malzeno also has very high tolerance and thresholds for statuses besides blast, so there really isn't much of an opportunity to status lock him, at least for solo. Tacked on to this, Malzeno also cannot be air dunked, try that a bunch of times, and he can't be dunked with exhaust ammo, so exhaust ammo is also off the table. Malzeno also has a few attacks where he is status immune, which is something a lot of flagships and bigger monsters in 5th gen have. Basically just during some of their attacks, if you cross a status threshold, it's not going to apply, it's going to keep the threshold at 1 and then wait for the monster to finish its attack, then you can apply status again to cross it. But you have to wait till the animation ends, and so for like Malzeno, when he jumps into the air and drops his ball on the ground to kick it at you, that's status immune. During his supernova also, once he starts the animation, status immune, but we're not going to see that. And I believe there's one other airborne attack, like a tail slam, where he cannot be statused. Oh, and then the 3 balls that he shoots, I think he's status immune during that as well. Basically all his blood attacks, he cannot be statused. So for the most part, this fight is just you and Malzeno, mano, just no holds bar. Now regarding his morb mode, Malzeno's transformation is always time based, so 2 minutes after his engagements, he's going to go morb mode. And this will vary a little bit because monsters do queue up attacks and you can kind of like stop and delay stuff with like your stuns, which we're going to do. But do be ready at about 2 minutes into the engagement, which for me is about 2:30, 2:40 into the hunt. This is really the only topple and stop we have for the fight, so you have to make it count. Malzeno doesn't really have any other ways of like toppling him outside of that aura brick topple. Again, air dunks don't work because he will get up immediately, and he doesn't have a natural head topple, so again, mano. While Malzeno is in his morb state, he doesn't honestly change too much, he just does 2 attacks instead of 1 most of the time. And for heavy bowgun, this is kind of abysmal because we're slower than a full short bus stuck in molasses, so we need to be creative, and I'll get to how we deal with that in a minute. And then the last thing I want to talk about before we go to the play-by-play is food skills. So because I'm using redirection with heavy bowgun, it's just a faster evade. I'm also eating for shifter, which does heal me a little bit each time I use scroll swap or redirect. So while I felt this was mandatory back then, I don't tend to eat for shifter anymore because it's just easier to take less hits than try to heal them off. But in Malzeno's case, and especially back then, I absolutely need it because there's a lot of attacks that I'm forced to either shoulder check or just take, and if I'm not full, I'm gonna die. So this fight is a huge balancing act on keeping your HP up while safely shoulder checking attacks to keep your pressure going. But alright, let's start with this breakdown. So starting off, again, I pick a location and spawn based upon the fastest engagement time. Sadly, running up from camp to Malzeno, even though it's in area 2, is not super fast in TA because I don't have a dog. So I have to take the buddy recon between 5 and 10, and then slide down, and thank god there's that slide there, it's not too bad. But also, most of the time Malzeno is actually going to be facing me when I land here from this area, whereas if I was coming up from the bottom, he's facing away, which is important because I start this fight with stickies. His KO threshold is 150, so I'm going to need 4 stickies to get to him, and we can't easily set that up between shooting him and then shoulder checking the engagement roar and then shooting the rest of them. And then I start with the KO because he's just going to be moving way too much during this fight. It's the only time to reliably get the stickies in, so it's the only time I'm going to have to do a lot of damage. Plus, doing it this way is going to force him into enrage mode immediately as he gets up, so it's another easy prediction. He just shoulder check right as he gets up. From here though, honestly, it's just a lot of muscle memory, but this is actually the most fun I had fighting a monster. Malzeno's my favorite monster in this game, for sure. So the whole point is we're trying to bait his AI to doing that forward sweep attack because we could just walk away from it, it's not going to hurt us, and we can keep shooting Malzeno because thankfully we have ballistics, which makes our range for spreads not terrible. You're going to want to be standing directly in front of him most of the time and get just a few feet back, so if he walks up to you, you can kind of walk backwards a bit before he starts swinging those arms. Then we have his stabbing lunge attack here, which is one of the many attacks which you just have to have down to muscle memory on that redirect, the other being like the wind slash or the jump. We can't shoulder check these as it will eat about half of our life, so we have to redirect, and if you miss one of these redirects, you're dead. Like literally it will one tap you. Maybe not anymore because we have a lot more armor, but it did then. The next attack here is those 3 balls that he does, and I think he's status immune during this. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he is. But for heavy bowgun, the only way to avoid this attack without evade extender is to use wire bug glide at a perpendicular line, and then don't forget to shoulder check after it's done to get that little extra movement forward. It is going to save your ass, and it is required to dodge that 3rd ball. Otherwise, you're going to be caught by the 2nd or 3rd as you recover from fat roll or wire bug, and a shoulder check is just going to make you dead if you try to shoulder check one and then take the other 2. Nowadays though, I'd probably just run evade extender since it's easier to fit in, since wire bug glide also wastes a lot of time, and at least with evade extender I can probably reposition myself better, but this is what we had to do at the time. So during the fight with these jump ins, you realize that I'm constantly taking little bits of damage, which is pretty much unavoidable. If I use redirect on all these little things, it's just going to waste too much time and all my openings, and I'll never get any damage in. So I have to take hits and then heal it off with redirect later. And then again, these bites and grabs, you just have to have down to muscle memory to redirect them. This is how we recover our life, and it's literally the only way to avoid these attacks since the tracking was so damn high back then. One of the small improvements I was trying to make during this fight was that when Malzeno jumps behind you to do that lunging stab, you can usually get in 2 shots before it would connect. So if you're fast enough at turning, you can get 2 taps in and then redirect and you're safe. If I was feeling unsafe, I would just do 1. But it's one of those little like tiny micro improvements I was trying to do, just get that extra shot in at every turn. But yes, there's just a lot of redirection in this fight. It looks easy, but if you miss one, insta dead. Maybe not anymore, but back then before augments, like, yeah, for sure. So then we get into Morb mode, and this is where Heavy Bowgun got kind of scary. Now that he does 2 attacks per Morb, we have a problem. We can only redirect one of these stabs, but it's not fast enough to do 2. I mean, sometimes you can make the second, but the inputs and rise are so bad that if you spam redirect, you might get Silk Bug attack, which means you're dead, and I can't risk that. So, small tangent, I hate Rise input so much. My redirect is middle mouse button, my Silk Bind is C, this shouldn't be an issue at all, but thank you Rise for having emulated controllers, I hate it. Anyway, because Rise is Rise, I have to redirect and then shoulder check into the second stab, or vice versa, it works, but I have to shoulder check one, which means I'm going to eat a fat chunk of HP. And this is why I need to stay topped off, because I lost almost half my HP from that, and if I do it again, I'm dead. This is why Shifter is important. Now when Malzeno does his Blood Blade attacks, I always panic because he has 2 patterns to this, that or I'm just paranoid, and I never know which one he's going to do because I don't pay that much of attention. So to be safe, I just wire up a glide through it, but then again, it eats HP, so chance of dying is high. Wire Bug Glide does have hyper armor at the beginning of the pull, so you can use it to get through some attacks, but somehow I did not get hit through this one, which is weird, but I would have done that anyway. Also, wow, on the second one here, which is the other pattern that shoots in the middle, I shoulder checked the blade, but I only now realized that the only reason why I survived this attack was because Bloodlust reapplied, and then it healed off all that red HP I had, which gave me enough life to actually take the hit. Kinda lucky, right? Bloodlust is OP. But this is when we get our topple, and this is finally a chance for a breather, so we get like 12 seconds of just pounding on him as he recovers, which is usually enough time to enrage worm again as he wakes up, so you can just kind of finish him off from there. Now, Malzeno does have a time transition, which is usually around the 330 or 340 mark, kind of like Kushala, but because he was downed for so long and had to enrage roar and then queue up his attacks, we got him dead before he could limp off out of there. I actually never found Malzeno hard to keep into the fight and get him killed before he would leave, at least compared to Kushala, that was a nightmare. But the ending here, once you're out of Morb mode, you're done, it's not so bad. But that's the Heavy Bowgun fight versus Malzeno TA. This is one I would actually definitely go back and improve since there's so much more that we can do now and we have the tracking nerf. I feel like this can easily go sub 330, maybe low 3s. And I actually may do that. I may go back and refight him because, again, favorite monster for me. But yeah, that's all for me. I hope you all learned something. Thank you all for watching, and good luck out there, hunters.